We'd like to welcome everybody to our Planning Commission meeting tonight. We have 4 commissioners present and 1 zoomed in, Ted Mickelson. We'd like to welcome those who are in attendance here, and should we be joined by any others. We will start with a public hearing. We have 2 matters for a public hearing tonight, and any of those who are present are welcome to comment on any of those 2 matters. The first one is a proposal to amend our city code by changing the 10-4-5D. We have a conflict, and that is an incorrect verbiage that's used. Let me share so y'all are aware. D says, in talking about site plans that come to the city, says each final site plan submitted shall contain the following information unless specifically waived by the Planning Commission in whole or in part. Title 10-12-2 of our code, which addresses essentially the same thing, says the following. Each site plan shall include all items listed on the site plan requirement checklist unless both the building inspector and/or assigned review official concurs to waive the inclusion of any item. So what we're proposing is that our current practice is we have several assigned Planning Commission members to review the site plan. It's not the Planning Commission as a whole. There are usually there's 2 individuals from the Planning Commission assigned to review them. So the way that that's written is incorrect, but the way that the correct one is written is the building inspector. He reviews a portion of the site plan that's technical and has to do with structural aspects of the site plan. But then other assigned review official, those are the Planning Commission members that review it. So in order to, there's 10 items that are required to be included as part of the site plan. And the issue is that all those items are required unless both the building inspector and the review official concurs to waive the inclusion of any of those 20 items in the site plan. If there's 20. Did I say 10 before? I'm sorry, I meant 20. For any reason. So it's just not one person who can decide that one of those items doesn't need to be provided. This was partially addressed at the time that the city codified its ordinances. And the way that was intended was for the building inspector and assigned Planning Commission members to review the site plans. This one part in 10-4-5D didn't get updated or corrected as it should have, and that's the reason we have differences in our city ordinance, and it was intended for the building inspector and assigned members of the Planning Commission to review the site plan. So that's what that item is about. The other item is a request that we've received to rezone property within the city. It's over on, I think, Valley View or Lakeview, and it's yeah. It's a total of 4.58 acres, and they want to rezone it from 2-acre plat to 1-acre plats. So those two items are on the public hearing agenda tonight. Just for your information, once we hear any public comment on those two items, then we'll go into our regular planning commission meeting and we'll have a discussion of amongst the planning commission members of those two items. So if you want to make a public comment, then now is the time to make it. We have, other than Ted, is there anybody else signed in, Jody, to the meeting tonight? And more particular, any who want to make public comment of those who are signed in? Okay, we'll first hear from those individuals if they want to make a comment, and then we'll hear from those who are present here for any comment. There probably is not likely to be a lot of comment tonight, so we'd ask you to use discretion in your time. We won't set any limits, but if it starts to run over, we'll say something. So we'll give you time to comment on either of those two items. Let Jody be the okay. Ronnie, go ahead with your comments.
Oh, hi. Actually, I was just listening in. I don't really have any comments. Just
Okay.
interested to see what happens, but thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay. Well, if we reach the end and she's still on there, we'll ask again. So that's those who are signed in. So we'll turn time over to those here who want to make public comment about either of those two items. First, are there some here who want to make comment? Okay, let me move this down here, and if you come forward. Put that chair here. Turn that on so that everybody could hear.
Okay. Thank you, Wayne. It sounds like it's a little more complicated than I had conceived from, the notices I read. I thought, but anyway, can I ask questions, or you
go
just
ahead.
want to?
We've got time tonight. If you'd like, we could answer. Well, yeah, let's go ahead with your questions now.
Okay. Now, I thought it was the planning commission's responsibility to review all these plans, and that they would be responsible for making the decision about what documentation should come. And it sounded to me like you were going to stop doing that, and that you would turn that responsibility over to two other people. Is that correct?
It's not.
Okay, tell me.
The two people who review those, in addition to our building inspector, are planning commission members.
Okay, so
they might differ from one time to another, but they're planning commission members who will be reviewing those.
okay, so what was the requirement that it would just be two people? The building inspector plus another designated person.
Whoever the reviewing officials are, and the building inspector. So it might be three sometimes, but there's just reviewing the plan.
Okay.
It only takes two to
Define
not what's the
define
word
what's
here?
required as far as
to waive any of the requirements.
Okay. Now, is this sort of purely an administrative function, or could the decisions they make about what they're requiring, could that affect the policy in some way? Policy of what you're trying to do?
they're generally administrative in nature. For example, one of our requirements is to show where a culvert is going to be located on the driveway.
Mhm.
Some building plan, they may have forgotten, overlooked that. And if they did, we'll talk to them and tell them that they need to provide that, but we may go ahead and approve their building plan without them showing the culvert on the site plan.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things we could waive. There's no really rationale to hold up the whole site plan because they didn't show where the culvert was going to go or know that it had to be on the site plan. So that may get waived, but with the understanding that they've got to,
Supply
Provide that.
information. at some
Correct.
point.
but the site plan would go ahead and be approved.
Okay.
So that's just an example
All right.
of what would happen. For example, another requirement that's on the site plan is to provide the building height.
Mhm.
That's not going to get waived.
Mhm.
We're going to say, no, you need to do the calculations that show us what the building height is.
Mhm.
So that's an important one, and that's not going to get waived. But some others that are maybe less important, another maybe think they're required to show the zone that the house is in. We know what it is, but we want to make sure that they know and understand because setbacks are determined by the zone they're in.
Yes.
So the fact that they don't have the zone shown on a site plan,
Mhm.
but they have correct setbacks,
Mhm.
that might be another thing that we would waive, but say, you need to show that and amend it, but we're going to go ahead and approve it now
Mhm.
because,
You're in conformance.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
yeah. So those are some examples.
Okay. Well, let me go to my bottom line here. I had 2 points that I felt were important. I got the impression that you were turning this responsibility over from the planning commission to these two other individuals. And I didn't feel that you should give up that, that have them do that because you are ultimately, the planning commission is ultimately responsible for the results. And so if you have, well, let me just say, renegade people who happen to do something, not in concert with what you would like, you don't have any control because they're the ones that are going to do the signature. So that's,
Yep.
that I would,
So we're in agreement.
okay. So that's not going to happen.
No.
Okay. I also felt that a body such as this with 4 or 5 people in it should remain in control of defining what's supplied because you can make better decisions than just maybe 2 people. So as long as the planning commission is still involved, perhaps, then maybe I don't really, I have an objection, but I just want to make you aware of that.
Well, the other situation is that if those 2 members have a concern or question, they will bring it to the group
Mhm.
to have input to make sure that we're in concert and agreement.
Okay, so that's the way you operate. Okay. All right. I guess those were my major concerns, and as long as you maintain control so that you don't delegate your authority to other people to do, then I guess it's okay.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
And just an addendum to that, the purpose for this clarification is we have 2 things in the code that are at odds with each other. And this decision will bring those together so it says the same thing in both places.
Are there any other comments from those present here that anybody wants to make on the public hearing? Okay. Appreciate your attendance. We will go ahead and close the public hearing and move into our regular planning commission meeting. We'll call that to order. Larry, would you lead us in a pledge of allegiance?
I would be happy.
And Lori, would you offer invocation for us? Okay, if you'd like to join with us in pledge of allegiance.
Please say the pledge with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we come before thee this evening as a planning commission and ask thee to please help us as we meet tonight, that we will be able to be open-minded with clear thoughts and be able to make decisions that will be best for our community. We are grateful for our homes and for the beautiful place that we live, and ask thee for thy help tonight. And we say this in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Our practice is to allow a couple of minutes if anybody wants to make any kind of a public comment before the planning commission on any topic that you choose to make a comment on. Usually they're on agenda items, but if they're not, that's okay too. If anybody here wants to make a public comment, just raise your hand. Okay, seeing no public comment, we will go on to our business discussion. I may not have, the first item on the agenda is the November 17 Planning Commission minutes, which was the last meeting we held. We didn't hold one in December. I may have neglected to send those out. Several of you have indicated that you haven't received them, so we'll table that approval of those minutes, and I will do some research and get those out to you. Haven't done that. Apologize for that. The next item is the proposed change that we talked about on these two parts of our code in Title 10. Any discussion that the commission members want to make or questions that they have on what's being proposed there with that change?
So have we actually developed the verbiage that we're going to?
Yes.
It's the same verbiage that's in.
It's that one that's in.
The other part, yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So it'll say building inspector
And other appropriate and other approving officials.
yeah, okay. All right.
Okay. So that would be it. The reading would be, each final site plan submitted shall contain the following information unless specifically waived by the building inspector or other approving official. And other, not excuse me, not or, and other.
Right.
So,
So there's actually now a two-pronged or two parts that have to be approved.
right, the building inspector has to come into the equation, whether it's things that he's reviewing, structural things, which I don't think he ever exempts, and the 20-point checklist that we have. Sometimes we'll bring him into that discussion if we have questions about it that he may be more familiar with, but it'll take him and one or both of the planning commission members to say, we'll pass on this right now and get it later. So that being the case, I'll take a motion on that this recommendation will go to the city council for their review and approval. So I would take a motion from anyone who wants, any member wants to make it, to approve it and recommend approving it to city council.
I would propose that we amend City Code 10-4-5D to be the same as the code in 10-12-2.
Okay? Is there a
I'll
second?
second that.
Second that? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Very good. Thanks, Ted. Right, you there for a minute.
Was that for or against?
Now, I jumped the gun a little bit. Are you for that?
Yeah, that was an aye.
Okay. Very well. Thank you. The next item is a rezone request. The process would be if we approve and make a recommendation to the city council that they will they have to hold a public hearing on it as well, and then they will take a vote, and their vote will be the final vote. We make a recommendation, but they may or may not follow that. But you've all gotten a packet on that, I think, today, and show where that is. And we didn't get any feedback on it. Mr. Crow is here. If you'd like to take maybe a couple of minutes and share with us any thoughts that you have on it, why you're wanting to rezone, so forth, just come on up to the table here. Push that button that turns green.
You're good.
It's
Okay.
on?
Okay.
Okay,
So-
thank you. My name is Nate Crow, and thank you, Commissioner Franson and the rest of the Planning Commission for your service. My wife and I recently purchased the property. It's been owned by Dr. Stone for many years now, and has been a nice vacant area for a long time. And we would like to build a home there on that lot, and we want to not change the neighborhood. We want to keep it peaceful and quiet. However, there's a corner of it that's a little bit of a shape that is kind of off to the side, and we'd like to subdivide and take that 1 acre and sell that one parcel off and keep the remainder that we would build a home on. That's the intent of what we're doing here, is to simply sell the 1 acre off and then keep the rest that we could build a home on.
Okay. On the information that was provided to you, it shows where that is, that protrusion out to the side. There's a red dotted line back there. And that's the portion that he's talking about selling off. Whenever he chooses to do that. So,
Yeah,
Yep,
there you go.
That Utah shape, they're taking that top part off.
That's right. We're going to cut the top of Utah.
You make it look like Colorado.
do any of the commission members have any questions of Nate?
How do water rights work with that?
If and when it's subdivided for a lot, then whoever that lot owner is would need to acquire a 0.90 acre feet of water to service that lot. That's an approved, that whole area is approved subdivision now. So, excuse me, an approved lot. So whenever that lot was platted to the city, there was water sufficient for that entire lot. So if the Crows build on that, their water has already been provided to the city for that. But when that gets separated off, whoever those new owners are at a point in time, that will need to be, they'll need to provide a 0.90 acre feet of water for that.
Yeah.
So. Okay. Nate, thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
Appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. I'll take a motion to approve the recommendation to change the zoning there from R1-1 to an from an R1-2 to an R1-1.
Aren't you making an assumption, Wayne? That we want to approve it? We can make a motion not to approve it.
You're right. Thank you for the correction. So
what you
I'll take a
intended?
motion from, for whatever you want to do with it.
Okay, I'll make the motion to approve the request to rezone the property located at 80 West Valley View from an R2 to an R1 zone.
Okay. Is there a second to Lori's motion?
I'll say.
All right. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of making that recommendation to city council, say aye.
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 Hey, any opposed? All right, thank you. We will forward that recommendation then, Nate, to city council for their action. Thank you. Next item is number 4 on the agenda. And I wanted to talk to you all, Commission, about that. It's something that we'll need to, I believe, my understanding, we'll have to hold a public hearing on it. But before we do that, I wanted to talk to you all about that. There's been a suggestion made. Our fencing ordinance requires a 5-foot setback from the property line for a fence on the side and on the back side of property. What that does is, if there's adjoining property, then there's 10 feet there that gets unattended. Generally there's no mowing or cutting or whatever. Potentially could create a fire hazard. It's possibly not getting watered, so the vegetation is going to dry out and becomes even more of a hazard. Secondly, oftentimes when one lot owner puts a fence up and the other one doesn't, it gives the doesn't one another 5 foot of property, because they go up to the fence line usually, and so we want to avoid those kinds of situations. And as the city staff have thought about that, we can't see that there could be a critical objection to allowing a fence on the side and on the back to be on the property line, to allow that. And we would restrict that to the sides and the back, not the front. We would treat the front similarly as we did with the change in fencing ordinance. Well, let me back up. We'd have to do some word crafting to it, because our ordinance now of a fence has a 30-foot setback on the street side. Perchance that may not be the front of the property. So we need to look at that a little more as far as crafting the right wording goes, to put it in kind of the same way we did with the R119 fencing, that you couldn't have a fence to the front, past the front plane of the property.
That's the front plane of the house.
Of the house, yes. Would still leave the 30-foot setback on the street side. Wouldn't change that. So I want to have a discussion or your thoughts on
So
on
if
doing
we're
that.
talking corner lots, we're really talking a 30-foot setback on 2 sides, right? Just like the setback for the house on a corner lot. Only it's 30 feet back. If you're in R1 or R2, it's 50 feet for the house, 30 feet for the fence.
You know, I'm wondering if our fence ordinance even addresses that now.
It says street side.
But
And
corner
so
lot
you've
would
got
have
2 streets on a corner lot.
Yeah,
And so it would still fit,
the fencing ordinance
the
does.
fence would still fit 30 feet back on each
Okay.
street.
Okay,
You've still got 50 feet back from the house, depending on the zone. But
so that's in place now.
yeah.
So on a corner lot, there might not be, on the one side, there would be change, but on the street side, there wouldn't be. It would be the same as the front, 30 feet
Right.
for a fence.
Just something to think about on the corner lot. You don't want one side to be too close to the street because of safety reasons, right? Cars
Correct.
don't see.
That's
Yes.
why we have on the corner lot, the setbacks are the same
Okay.
on the street sides.
Yeah,
Whether it's some zones it's 30 feet, some zones it's 20 feet. Most of the zones it's 50 feet.
whatever that front setback is, yep.
Well,
We'd
the
keep
house
that.
setback.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So
Now, do we still have a limit on what percentage of the lot can be fenced?
You know, there is no limit.
There isn't. What
I
about,
looked for it and I looked for it and I could not find a limit on how much you could.
because I
fence
thought
it
there
off.
was something
what there
about
is a-
allowing for the wildlife to
there's an
pass
openness.
through.
There's an openness requirement where a fence can't be like a shield.
Right.
It has to be a picket kind of fence where there's enough openness in depending upon where that fence is on the property. But I agree with Severn. I don't know of any restriction for,
I mean, I may not just not have found it because I was under the same impression, Lauren, and I looked and I looked and I looked. and I
Maybe that
could
was
not
an old
find
WAPA
a
thing or
percentage.
something.
it could have been
Yeah.
not a city ordinance, but a CCNR from the past.
Yeah. You know, another comment about placing it on the lot line. I mean, to me, this makes better neighbors. They're now sharing a fence. They could be sharing the cost of the fence as well. And so it just makes sense to me that we can do that. We still, if we still keep the restrictions on 30 feet on a street side, so that we have that open feeling that we want to have in Woodland Hills. And I was just, we'll talk about this later, but I was reviewing the general plan. I mean, that's one of the tenets of Woodland Hills, that this is a rural city and we want to have an open feeling.
Yeah.
And I think even with putting fences on property line, we can still have an open feeling with the setbacks on street sides.
There is a public easement requirement for 8 feet on each side of that property line. So that won't change. There's a total, there may be potentially portions of fence that may need to be removed temporarily if there's a sewer repair or a water repair that needs to be done on that property line. But you're likely going to have that problem anyway if you've got a fence with only a 10-foot wide swath to go between it to get to it. So we're not changing the easement distance at all. We're leaving that as our code says, just allowing the fence to go up to the property line.
And I would agree with Severin, Wayne, that the 3 other homes we've lived in where we've had fences, that's what's always been allowed, is you put your fence on the property line. One, for the reasons you mentioned, that then you're getting full use of your property and your neighbor's not getting use of it if he doesn't put up a fence. But secondly, it's area that I don't know the city, then it becomes a perception that the city's supposed to maintain that area. And I don't know that we, as a city, want to take on that responsibility or even perception of responsibility. So I'm in favor of this suggestion.
Okay, good.
We don't have language yet for this. We're just.
No,
discussing
we
it.
don't. And we'll put some language together and then make this part of a public hearing, probably in February, and to get public comment about it. And then we'll go forward from there. So we won't take a vote on anything tonight, other than there's a general consensus here that everybody feels that's a good avenue to take and proceed along. And so I'll send out some recommendations for language on that, how the fencing ordinance would be changed, and we'll look at that and then put that on a public hearing for February. So,
Okay, now you said that the front of the house may not be facing the street, and I'm wondering why that would matter. I like the idea of the street sides being open, whether the house is turned differently or not.
yeah, there's no requirement, no building requirement that says the house has to face the front.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends, someone could put it on the side with a sidewalk coming up and
Yeah.
going to the side of the house
I
and
think that's
things like
fine.
that.
Yeah.
So that'd be,
Yeah, I like that.
very well. Item 5, our meeting schedule for next year. It seems to have worked out pretty good with third Wednesday, 7 o'clock is, are we all good with keeping that time for this coming year? We haven't had too many conflicts, if any, with that. And so your thoughts?
I'm fine.
You're good with it?
It works. I wonder if anyone would prefer 6. Some nights we're here kind of late.
Ted works,
Oh,
so
okay.
that,
We all were, we just. not
Well,
the way we used to.
yeah.
Yeah, 6 is a little tight for me.
It's who you're working for.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess if I'm in the city, it's not so bad. If I'm not in the city, then that's usually about the time I get home.
Yeah, okay. Are you good with third Wednesday at 7, Ted?
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay. I'll take a motion to adopt that for this coming year.
I would
Or to
propose
change.
that we establish the planning commission meeting to be the third Wednesday at 7 o'clock.
Okay, is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Did I hear you, Ted?
Aye, sorry. Yeah, I was trying to get my
Okay.
mute off.
Okay.
Yeah, aye.
All right. Thank you. Any opposed? Very good. That carries in. We'll continue our same schedule next year. Item 6 on the agenda is selecting a chair and a vice chair for next year. Don't be too quick, Severin.
I propose that Wayne Franson be nominated as the planning commission chair and Larry Henry be the vice chair.
Second.
Second that. Oh,
Who seconded it?
maybe Ted beat me.
So did Lori.
Ted.
Ted did. I hurried and seconded that one. Yeah.
Ted and Lori. Okay. All right. Well, I'll make the sacrifice. Do you want to make the sacrifice, Larry? Okay. Highest paid job in the city. Oh. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And Ted, you're an aye, I guess?
Yeah, I'm an aye. Sorry.
Okay. Very good. Thank you all. The last item on the agenda, 7, is the general plan update. Where this year, we need to work on updating the general plan. It's been 5 years, and I don't see it taking a lot of work, but obviously some. It's going to need to be some tweaking. We've got a new city council also that may have some thoughts and places they want to put some emphasis that maybe we haven't in the past, and make a few changes to it that way. So I kind of want to give everybody a heads up to that, and let's start spending some time in it and looking at it and seeing ourselves where we might see some changes that we ought to consider and where we need to make changes in there. But let's have an open discussion on it, whatever you want to say or about it as we talk about it a little bit here tonight.
As I said earlier, I was looking at it tonight, and it's 67 pages long. Last time, when we did it 5 years ago, Wayne and I are the only ones on the planning commission now that were part of it back then. But some of the things we did last time, we actually sent out a survey to the whole city to identify what their concerns were. And that was part of the process that we went through last time. I don't know that that's required in state statute. We do have to have open meetings. to get feedback from the residents. But, and then as I was reviewing it today, I mean, I went through all 67 pages. I did not read all 67 pages of words. But there are some issues in there that we need to deal with. Changes that have taken place since we developed that general plan 5 years ago. But I didn't see a lot of drastic things that probably need to be changed. But I think we need to talk about how we want to approach it. Do we want to have another survey of the citizens, or do we just want to review it on our own and then present what we propose? We had an open house last time to discuss what we were proposing. And then we actually had another meeting after the open house. That was an open hearing, as I remember.
To take the ideas and so forth.
Yeah, but use the open house to get the ideas besides what we had developed from the survey. And then we had another open meeting to kind of finalize what we wanted to do. So, I mean, that's what we did last time. And I think we need to discuss whether or not how far we want to go this time. Anyway, that's just my thoughts.
Okay. I know that, and I don't know how many participated in this. I don't know, it was a year ago, the city there was a survey done on trails in the city, and we could easily take that information from that survey. It hasn't been released yet, but they're looking at it, and I think plan on releasing it in the near future. And that may be a guide to us as well. They had pretty
there
good.
is a very extensive chapter on trails. Yes. In the general plan. So, I mean, I started to read it. And it was really detailed.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether we need to go that far.
But we can look at those survey results and see if that matches up with the plan, or if we need to modify or change the plan from some of that survey information that we got. Well, that has already done, but that was just for trails. So the one that Severin is talking about was much more encompassing. Again, that detail was provided in the general plan, if I recall. I haven't looked at it for a while, but I think it's the back of the general plan. So that's something we ought to look at and ourselves look and see, do you think that the city, things have changed, that needs to be modified? Do you think that would still hold up in today's culture and atmosphere? There haven't been, well, from 5 years ago, there's been quite a bit of change in the city with new residents coming in and so forth. So maybe we would find that there's been some change that would require some modification to some of that detail and information. And we'll get input from the city council as well, their views from their review to help guide us in what we do to provide to them. We don't want to get a situation where it's just it's our views and those that we've talked to, and then the city council says, well, we're thinking a lot different. Have to kind of start over again. We don't want to have that happen. So we want to try to give them a product that they're going to be comfortable with. It might get tweaked a little bit by them here or there, and that's certainly their prerogative, but we would rather give them something that is in line with where their thinking is at, so forth now. So this, for those of you who haven't been involved with a general plan, it's a guide that the city uses as it goes forward, a strategic guide. It generally doesn't have a whole lot of detail in it, specifics about things. It's more of a strategic kind of guide that will guide the city through development and through what the city plans on doing or is doing in a general sense. So,
But to give one quick example, there is a bold statement in bold in the general plan that said the city discourages development of private roads. And we've just approved private roads since then.
things changed.
Right?
Yeah. So, yeah. And you'll see things in there that maybe aren't addressed that 2 years from now or whatever, the city embarks on, feels that's the right course to take, and it may not be in the general plan. So it's just, again, it's a general overview of where the city, but it's an important document because the essence of it is that the city, to the degree possible, should be guided by what it says in the way that it does things in development and
It's
character
really,
of the city.
in my point of view, it's kind of a vision of what we want the city to be.
Ted, in any of your experiences with, have you seen any, you want to make any comments about the general plan and with what you've had with your work at all?
Well, no, I agree. I mean, it's something we see quite often is, updating general plans every 5 years as a city, because things, like you said, change, you grow. There's need to do sometimes different things. I don't get involved as much in general planning. We do have a planning group that does quite a few of those. But I think it's a good thing to do for a community every 5 years. I'm not, yeah. I mean, I guess that's what I'd have to add, but not sure if you were looking for something specific, but
No.
I would agree with updating it. It's a good thing to do. I mean, we do a lot of master plans for communities, water systems, sewers, whatever. And the worst thing you can do is have it be a dead document, put it on the shelf and it goes there to die. They're meant to be living documents to be used, to change, to update. So I think it's a great thing to go through and update these.
Okay, thank you. Our general plan is on the city's website, so anybody can go on and look at it. And we can probably, Jody, can we get copies made for the planning commission members who don't have them? Okay, so we'll do that and get those in your hands so that you've got a working document there to look at as you review things. But it's on the city website as well to take a look at it if you'd like to do that.
We're going to start discussing this in February. So between now and then, we take a look at it, identify areas that we may need to change or things that we'd like to change.
Yeah, I agree. So let's plan on doing that we'll put that on the agenda for a February meeting and talk a little bit more in depth about it and kind of maybe set a course of action that we need to pursue as we go forward here. So
Wayne, can I ask a question?
please.
I've been through our general plan a little bit. It's been a little while, but how many sections are there? I mean, sometimes these documents like this that tend to be a little bit larger documents, it's easier to break them down and take them off in small bites and take a section at a time and get through it and then another section. And I just haven't looked enough at ours yet in detail to know how many sections there are, or is that going to be a method? Maybe we look at tackling it at just, each month or two. I mean, these a lot of times take several months to get through, but take a section and kind of focus in it rather than the entire plan trying to eat the elephant, all in one sitting.
Yeah, we've got 9 sections in there.
67 pages.
And one thing we did 5 years ago was we kind of assigned those sections out to the planning commission members for just responsibility for them, but to do some research on those where it was needed. And then that when we got around to that section, then that person would share, and then we'd have all the rest of us making comments or about the section ourselves. So that seemed to work pretty good. We'll talk about that next month, if that's kind of the course that we want to pursue. But yeah, it's a bite at a time, so to speak, and I think that's some wise.
One of the last section is on moderate income housing. And with what the state has done with
ADUs.
We're going to have to tweak that section, I think, quite a bit.
Yeah. Where we really haven't there really hasn't been a need, and we realize that, but the state, in adopting this accessory dwelling unit legislation, has put the requirement on the cities, and it's a good way of doing it, I think, because here in our city, I think there's opportunities for people to rent part of their house to another family. And I'm not talking about family members coming and living with you, but that happens too. But another party to come and rent a basement out if it has the necessary facility that accommodates that, that satisfies the requirements that the state has put on cities for moderate income housing to a degree. So anyway, that's a plus to be able to put that into place and have that as part of our moderate income housing here in the city without building a bunch of apartments somewhere. So very good. Anything from the Planning Commission members that any issues or things or for future agendas that?
Were you in on the budget meeting last night?
I wasn't.
Because
It was over.
Yeah. Well, Corbett brought up a really good point about water runoff, and I'm wondering if we need
Yeah.
to look at that.
Let me
Is
share
that
just a
part of
little
our
bit.
responsibility, or-
Yes, in part. Stormwater runoff.
Yeah.
We have a chapter, or excuse me, a whole title on that in our city ordinances. So I would encourage all of us to look at that, become generally familiar with it. But it is of concern for the city. We're required to retain not all, but a large part of our own runoff, prevent it from going onto county or other city properties. And it becomes largely a matter of how a subdivision might be designed to contain its own water. Individual homes are required to retain a portion of their water before the home was built to not allow it to run off. And the city really has never done a study of this. We know we have some problems that we have to address. Ted's been involved in some of those discussions with other cities and the county. But it costs money to do a study, but that's probably the way that it's headed. Right now, the Public Works Committee is supposed to be kind of reviewing that and making a recommendation back to the city council as to how best to address it. But it's something that we need to be aware of and give consideration to when we see a subdivision plan or a phase of it, to make sure that our city code is being followed in what they do with their stormwater runoff. And one of the requirements too for the site plans for lots is to make sure that they have, that whatever they've done hasn't caused a greater amount of runoff from their lot, either onto city property or to their neighbor's property. They have to have a grading plan that's tied into that site plan and reviewed and see how they are retaining the stormwater runoff. We're not talking about sewer or things like that, but stormwater. So those are issues the city is concerned about right now.
And when you find a contractor, after doing the site plan and saying, hey, all this water coming off this house is gonna go right down on that house. You need to do something to corral that water so it doesn't run on the house across the street.
Yeah, we pointed that out in some of the site plans where
Yeah.
we didn't feel that was adequately addressed.
One of the things that Corbett said was that traditionally the water has run down the street and into the empty fields below, but now these fields are starting to be built on, and we can't have our water flooding homes that will be there in the future. So
Yep.
it could be a big concern.
So, very good. Let me just share briefly, I know it's not on the agenda, the development agreement
Oh, yeah.
with Summit Creek. We had a conversation last night with our attorneys. There's a draft of an agreement. It's been back and forth quite a few times between the city and Summit Creek. And there's changes that the city feels yet need to be made to it. So our attorney was going to be getting a hold of Summit Creek's attorney, hopefully today, to talk about those changes. And I'd say probably, well, at least probably between 80 and 90% is everybody seems to be in sync on it. It'll ultimately be the city council who approves it. But the mayor wants a planning commission to look at it once it's finalized. So we're going to be we'll call a special meeting, and that will be the only topic. It won't be people are invited. It won't be a public hearing, but it'll be a public meeting. Anybody's welcome to come to, and we'll have a discussion about that. And we'll get that to you as much before we can, so that you can look at it and be familiar with it and ask questions, and we can talk about it as the mayor would like then a recommendation from the planning commission to the city council. Thumbs up, thumbs down, what about this, what about that, to guide them in their review and discussion. But they will have a public hearing with it in a stage that it is finalized and stage that we review it. They will have a public hearing, and then they're just the city council. And then
So we don't.
we
do
don't.
that
correct,
Because it's not technically land use.
correct. They're not changing, it's not changing any land use ordinances with the agreement. If it were, then we'd be having a public hearing as well. So, anyway, that's a process. It'll go to the city council, and the same night they'll have a public hearing as well as a discussion about it and take our recommendation into their consideration. And they may come up with some things that they don't like or want included. Don't know. At that time, further tweaking would happen before the mayor signs it and Summit Creek would sign it. So that's kind of where we're at with that now, that development agreement.
Have they addressed those concerns we had about their wanting access to properties on the east side of the city that they own?
Yes. The recommendation was going to be made to take that out because it was not within their project area. And if a time comes, then we could make a separate agreement for that in some way or another if an agreement was needed. But that's what was talked about last night. Our attorneys are going to recommend that section be taken out.
What about parking capacity in some of their parking areas?
It's not addressed, it will be by code, by whatever our code is. And that's an important thing to consider, that there are really no deviations from what our code is per se. There's some understandings there, and there's obviously some legal ease to it. But throughout the whole document, there's an understanding that city code will be followed in the way that things are developed. But they have a lot of latitude in how they go about developing, but they're going to be bound by our city ordinances and codes in doing so.
And then another final concern I have is they talk about private roads, and we have delineated what those will be and where they are.
They've made recommendations, but those aren't addressed specifically in the agreement other than they can have them. So that'll be up to the city then as they come forward with a plat. Then as those roads are identified there, then that's when we'll have our discussion with them, and city agreement or concerns or whatever we have will be part of that. So, and gates the same way.
Sure.
They kind of go hand in hand. Roads and gates, same thing. They'll be able to have them as the code allows them to have them. So, and I don't know a timetable on everything. It might be kind of short notice with trying to get everybody together, but I appreciate your being flexible and working with trying to get that done.
I think it would be nice to have something in writing and get beyond that. You promised, or we promised, or they promised, sort of conversations that drive us and citizens crazy.
Yep. Well, it'll be a guide to both us and Summit Creek. So, but it'll help them. They'll know the parameters that they have to work with and what they can do.
Well, it's good for them.
Yeah.
It's a win-win to do that.
Yep. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
All right. All in favor?
I
Aye. Very good. Thanks, Ted, for zooming in.